we're making our way through Joshua, but I'm kind of cheating a little bit. I don't know if this is cheating, but it's been very ponderous going through, who's getting what, and everything is described to us ad nauseum. I mean, it wasn't to the original Israelites. They knew all the places, knew where it was, and went, oh, okay. But for us, we're like, if it's not Jericho, if it's not Jerusalem, if it's not Bethlehem, if it's not Galilee, Nazareth, we don't know where it is. So what I did is I looked ahead and I said, well, I'm going to do all the allotment of the land and combine it into one lesson, and then I'm just going to read select portions where it just kind of gives us, the process of how it was done or what's going on, that sort of thing, because it's, whoa, man. I just thought it makes it more digestible, and so, yeah, and so which means really, so we're going through chapters 16 through 22 today, and we're just going to read select portions. So the allotment of the land, there's going to be some refuge cities. I suppose we could say sanctuary cities, but that has a different connotation today because of politics, right? And so we'll go, well, what's kind of the deal with that? And then there's even places for the Levites to live, even though they're not a tribe that actually has its own state, province, or designated area. Let's say that, okay? Like the other tribes, okay? And that's, the book of Joshua many times has said why. Okay? So, intro so far, a quick little review, right? So, well, we know who's Joshua. He's the successor of Moses. Joshua was one of the original spies who went into Canaan when they started their wilderness journey. He and Caleb, they went in there and said, hey, yeah, they're giants and they're scary looking, but God's on our side, so we'll be okay. The other 10 were like, well, we're kind of scrawny and they're pretty strong and we won't have a chance. So 40 years later is when they go into the promised land. And so he's the one who actually takes the people across the river. And then he and the Israelites, for the most part, they have a series of victories. They lost against, I'm going to say AI, just because I want to. Which is a small tell, and they should have just knocked him in the dirt, but it's because they didn't follow God's guidance. And so, okay, you all agree to kind of follow the covenant, and you're doing your own thing. So now the conquest is for the most part complete. We'll find out that there's still a little bit. There's still a few things on the fringes. And but we're going to hear the rest of the distribution. So that brings us to chapter 16. It looks like everybody has given up. I can't handle Joshua, all those weird names. But I think we only have, after this we'll only have because Joshua has 24 chapters. So we can finish up next week if we want. So think through. Well, yeah, but at the same time, I didn't want to get too bogged down, because there's not as if there's a whole lot of theological import or stuff that, oh, wow, we can really pick up theologically or doctrinally, or, this is just really kind of the history of the allotment of land and God being faithful to his promises. Okay, so that's the overarching message. And I just took away the punchline, I guess. Or the conclusion. Okay, so Joshua chapter 16, verses 1 through 4. The allotment of the people of Joseph went from the Jordan by Jericho, east of the waters of Jericho, into the wilderness, up from Jericho into the hill country to Bethel. Then going from Bethel to Luz, it passes along Ataroth, the territory of the Arkites. Arkites, they're not one that's well known. Then it goes down westward to the territory of the Japhletites, as far as the territory of the lower Beth Horon, then to Gezer, and it ends at the sea. So it would be Palestine today, or Judea. Well, Judea is really more south, but it would be when you look at the maps of Israel, it's that area. Okay, both northern and southern kingdoms as they later split. The people of Joseph, Manasseh, and Ephraim received their inheritance. So we hear this a number of times in Joshua. We'll hear stuff that all point to, did the people have to fight for it? Yeah. But what is it called? Their inheritance. So they had to fight for it, but they won battles they never should have. They shouldn't have won at Jericho. They should have all been defeated at Jericho, and it ended there. Because Jericho was mighty, and the Israelites really weren't. So it's called an inheritance because God promised to give it to them. And then we'll see some other stuff concerning the allotment and distribution, which really says that God's hand is in it. And he's kind of taking away some of our selection or our choosing. Okay, so there we go. So that's kind of the allotment there, and we're going to jump forward into chapter 17 to spare ourselves from lots of descriptions and whatnot. Okay, so 17. Let's look at verses 14 through 18. Okay. Then the people of Joseph spoke to Joshua, saying, "Why have you given me but one lot and one portion as an inheritance, although I am a numerous people?" So what does this sound like? A little griping. But the case is being made, hey, we have a lot of people, so we need more land. So, that could be exaggeration, but, it's probably based on some legitimacy, because we'll continue on. Okay, so we are, although I am a numerous people, since all along the Lord has blessed me. And Joshua said to them, "If you are numerous people, go up by yourselves to the forest, and there clear ground for yourselves in the land of the Perizzites and the Rephaim, since the hill country of Ephraim is too narrow for you." So he's saying, well, hey, go and, you mean we have to clear forest land? That's hard work, right? But hey, the hill country is not enough for us. Yet all the Canaanites who dwell in the plain have chariots of iron, both those in Beth-shean and its villages, those in the valley of Jezreel. Then Joshua said to the house of Joseph, to Ephraim and Manasseh, "You are a numerous people and have great power. You shall not have one allotment only, but the hill country shall be yours. For though it is a forest, you shall clear it and possess it to its farthest borders." Okay, so you're going to have more real estate, but it's going to involve more work. Okay? So in the long run, it's going to be good, but in the short term, right, they're going to have to do clearing and whatnot. "For you shall drive out the Canaanites, although they have chariots of iron, and though they are strong." See? So you can kind of see that the land, okay, the battles are done, but there's still fringe areas, like right here, right? Okay, well, so clear the land and drive out whatever remnant of the Canaanites or whoever is there. Okay, so, and that's what will happen. They'll live there, they'll clear the land, and they'll push these people out. Okay? And so their willingness to do this, it does show faith in God that this will happen. Okay? So that's kind of what has happened with kind of some of these larger tribes. So these are like, descendants of Joseph. Okay? So part of the large group. Well, now we're going to get to what would really be kind of the middle and southern area. I'm calling it that because that's where the people will live. It's not as if that was where they were from 400 years earlier. Who knows? Okay, or their ancestors. Okay, so that's what's going to be talked about in these two chapters, 18 and 19. Okay, and also it will talk about it right now where the people will gather for worship, because it won't be in Jerusalem yet. So let's see. Okay. So we now kind of leap into chapter 18. We'll read verses 1 through 3 and then verse 10. Then the whole congregation of people of Israel assembled at Shiloh. So when you hear a term like the whole congregation of the people of Israel, who's included? What does that mean? Everybody. Yeah. So it's not like, oh, well, it's not only the people who went to church. It's really everybody, because they're set apart by God, right? They're God's holy people. So now this would be weird for us, because Israel, there is no separation of church and state, right? It's a theocracy. I mean, even when Israel will get a king, okay, he's a king and he's supposed to be doing God's bidding, okay, as well as other stuff. But I mean, so there isn't this kind of, where us, we have this church and state separation, because we go, well, people can believe whatever they want or not believe anything, okay? So we're a secular society, though with religious roots as part of our heritage. Okay? So when it says the congregation of the people of Israel assembled, that's basically everybody. I mean, something would have to be weird for you not to be there. Okay? So they're gathering for worship. Okay? The land lay subdued before them. There remained among the people of Israel 7 tribes whose inheritance had not yet been appointed. So Joshua said to the people of Israel, how long will you put off going to take possession of the land which the Lord, the God your fathers, has given you? Well, what do you mean? They went around and they defeated armies, but it sounds as if the way Joshua's talking is what? The people haven't spread out. So if you militarily win a victory and then you're not living there, what can easily happen? Yeah, they go, oh, well, yeah, they defeated us, but they're not here now. And so people, right? So he's saying, hey, we need to occupy the land, or someone else will occupy it. I mean, right? So yeah. So he's saying, okay, it's time to do that. Okay, so and then let's look at verse 10. Okay, so 9b and 10. Then they came to Joshua to the camp at Shiloh, and Joshua cast lots for them in Shiloh before the Lord. So casting lots, the way we'd go, oh, well, that's kind of random, right? At least because, it's some sort of thing where you're not choosing, but let's just see. But in a sense, what's going on? Okay, well, we're having faith that God in His providence will work through these randomly seeming things. Okay? And so it's taking away the decision from the people. And the people are recognizing, well, this is how God is working. Now, how do we know that it's just not some crazy, weird scheme, that God is actually working through this? And Joshua cast lots for them in Shiloh before the Lord. That's what tells us, before the Lord. Okay, so this just isn't weird stuff. Okay, this actually is by God setting it up to say, this is how we're going to do it. Okay, so they use lots, and that's not weird. We see lots often throughout Scripture. Okay, and so there's even there's a congregation, and I don't remember its name, but the congregation, they would have a call committee when it's time to call a pastor. And then they would say, okay, based on the call committee, we think this guy would be a good one, this guy would be a good one. And they present the slate to the voters' assembly. But then they draw lots. And the final selection is done by lot. Wow. That's pretty wild, isn't it? So ahead of time, everyone says, well, as far as we can tell, every one of these will be, a godly man for pastor. But then, we're not going to go all the way, right? So, yeah. Okay, and Joshua cast lots for them in Shiloh before the Lord, and there Joshua apportioned the land to the people of Israel, to each his portion. So we have two things going on. The word inheritance is being used, that this is God's gift to us, and then lots. So in a sense, lots are taking away our kind of, well, we chose this. Even though we did see a little bit of that going on, so like with Jacob's daughter and son-in-law and whatnot. So, yeah. So that's another allotment. So here you have the 7 tribes, and they're going to live in the central and southern part. Okay? And the last of the group is chapter 19. Okay, so are we okay so far? This is going a lot smoother than me trying to read all the names. So, all right. Chapter 19. Okay, we're going to leapfrog to verse 49. So as I'm reading through these chapters, I could mispronounce them in my mind as I'm reading them. Oh, how horrible. I shouldn't be chuckling about that. So, verse 49. This is what does your Bible say? Mine says, the inheritance for Joshua. So you have all the allotment of the land, everything, and then who's left for last? Joshua. Wow. Right? This is beautiful that Joshua is last. It tells us what kind of leader he is. Okay. So let's look at 19 verses 49 through 51. When they had finished distributing the territories of the land as what? Inheritances. There we have that word again. The people of Israel gave an inheritance among them to Joshua the son of Nun. So, okay. So among the inheritances, they're giving an inheritance. See, so in a sense, this is all seen as God being the provider, and even what they give to Joshua from the inheritances they received, which God gave to them through Joshua, right? They're seeing this as all God's doing. I mean, the way it's written is beautiful. Okay? So, of the land as inheritance, the people gave an inheritance among them to Joshua the son of Nun. By command, the Lord they gave him the city that he asked, Timnath Serah on the hill country of Ephraim, and he rebuilt the city and settled in it. These are the inheritances that Eleazar the priest and Joshua the son of Nun and the heads of the fathers' houses of the tribes of the people of Israel distributed by lot at Shiloh before the Lord. So Shiloh, at least at this point, is the place where the tabernacle is set up, and it's the place of worship. It won't be the place of worship forever. That'll move to Jerusalem. But for now, this is kind of the central, right, part of the center of gravity for the Israelites right now. Okay? So it was distributed by lot at Shiloh before the Lord, at the entrance of the tent of the meeting. So that's the tent of the meeting that's the tabernacle. It's the tent and all the stuff that's set up. It's the predecessor to the temple. Okay. They call it the tent of meeting because that's where the people met. Okay? So it would be like some congregations may call themselves like assembly or something, right? Because the people assemble there. So they finished dividing the land. Yay! Now the land is divided and the tribes have their portions and all is well. And we're still awake. So now there's couple more things though, because there will be some cities that are designated cities of refuge, and when you first hear this, you're going to think this is weird. But it's set up by purpose, not to allow lawlessness. We'll kind of get into it, okay? But to help inculcate a mindset, okay? So I suppose we can say it shares maybe 10% in common with today's sanctuary cities. Because sanctuary cities are supposed to be a refuge where illegal aliens or whatever, won't be prosecuted. Okay? I don't think that's going to last too long because everyone's saying, hey, there's too many people. But, so in a sense, it gives sanctuary to certain people. And so let's look at verses 1 through 3, and then we'll look at the excursus. Because you'll go, well, why is that the case? Check this, then the Lord. So this isn't just something Joshua said, hey, let's do this. Then the Lord said to Joshua, say to the people of Israel, appoint the cities of refuge of which I spoke to you through Moses, that the manslayer who strikes any person without intent or knowingly may flee there. Which would, if we were to put it in as we understand one person killing another, what would this exclude? It would exclude first degree murder. In other words, so if you plan to kill, no. So in other words, this is really, we would say, it could be manslaughter, something that happens by accident, and you end up killing somebody and you didn't intend to, but it happened. Okay. Let's hope you didn't make it look like it was an accident, which I'm sure somebody will do. But the intention is what? If you unintentionally killed someone for whatever reason, there are places where you can go. I think we can understand why, right? So what happens if you unintentionally killed someone? Well, his or her family may come after you and say, we don't care if it was an accident. You're going to die, buddy. Right? But we won't tell you when. So that way you'll be miserable for 6 months or whatever, right? Not knowing when. So in a sense, it's to stop that. Okay? So strikes any person without intent or unknowingly may flee there. They shall be for you a refuge from the avenger of blood. And that makes sense because if somebody ends up being killed, right? You go, well, it was an accident. Well, it's better to be accident than deliberate, but still, it doesn't bring the person back. Okay? So, excursus, refuge cities. The cities of refuge in Joshua 20 are a unique aspect of the Israelite legal system. These cities served as places where someone who had accidentally killed another person could flee for safety. This prevented the cycle of blood feuds, where a relative of the deceased, known as the Avenger of Blood, might seek to kill the accidental manslayer in retaliation. So, it's to stop Hatfield and McCoy thing. So I don't know who the first person died in that mess, but we know kind of in our national lore that there was this family feud that went on in the mountains of West Virginia for 3 generations or something? And when the grandsons are killing each other, well, I don't know why. Who knows, right? Yeah, but, so you'd say at some point you'd want to go, really? Is this serving any point? We're just mad at each other and killing each other. Eventually... Oh, okay. Yeah. So, But I mean, that's the most well-known. I'm sure there are others, but I don't know. So, but it's so something like that doesn't develop. Because once it happens and it gets institutionalized within a family, right? Yeah. Okay. The rationale behind this provision was rooted in the understanding of justice and mercy. Okay? Through the law given to Moses, God sought to ensure that punishment was proportional and that there was protection for those who had not intentionally done wrong. The cities of refuge were a practical working out of this principle. The Hebrew word for refuge used in Joshua 20 is miklat, which connotes a place where one might flee in hope or expectation of safety. The concept of refuge aligns with a broader biblical narrative which often portrays God himself as a refuge for his people. Right? Psalm 46, perfect example, Luther's favorite psalm, right? From which a mighty fortress is based. Okay? Joshua 20 verse 3 clearly states the purpose of these cities, that the manslayer who strikes any person without intent or unknowingly may flee there. They shall be for you a refuge from the avenger of blood. This provision reflects the character of God, who is just but also merciful. Now, let's go back to let's go back to Exodus 20, right? If we're to say, well, God is just and merciful, which one is he more of? Merciful, yeah. Okay, because he gives us the ratio. Now, when it translates it, it says, well, he remembers the iniquity to the third and fourth, and generation is put in there, right? But that's not in the text. Now, you could interpret it that way, but the text is really giving you the ratio. It says third and fourth versus 1,000. See? 3, 4 versus 1,000. So, yeah, God will take us to the woodshed and spank us, right? But he would much more prefer to be merciful, to be gracious, right? So in other words, it's as if God is saying, give me an excuse to be merciful, right? I mean, if we want to put it in kind of our terms, right? So yeah, he's the law enforcer, but he's also the what? The mercy bestower. Okay? So it's a reminder that God's law was not merely about punishment, but also protection, mercy, and restoration. Okay, right? So that's the purpose of these things called refuge cities. So there's a little overlap, I guess we could say, in what today are sanctuary cities, but almost very little, right? Yep.
Yeah, in those cities.
Mm-hmm.
It said that they have to, once they're there and they're admitted through the gates, they have to stay there.
Right.
Until they stand trial.
Well, this was unintentional. So, yeah, it's kind of like, well, is somebody going to live there forever? I mean, the idea is that, his name's cleared or the fury dies down, and because it's really not too long after. Right? So, yeah. So, yep. And then after the fact, you when you cool down, it's, yeah. Okay. Well, now that we're going to get into sanctuary refuges, there's Levitical cities. Now remember, these guys are not a tribe that has designated land, but they're designated places for them to live. And what we'll find out is, well, where will they live? Let's see. Let's look at 21. Wow, we're going to finish super early. What are we going to do?
Sit around it. Talk like it.
Oh, yeah, talk like, right? Okay, chapter 21. It took a long time to do this, but then that's because I'm working through all of it and deciding which verses and, all of that stuff. When you go through it, it's like, that's it?
We appreciate your effort.
We appreciate all your effort because the lesson's shorter. Oh, boy. Okay, 21 verses 1 through 3. Then the heads of the fathers' houses of the Levites came to Eleazar the priest and to Joshua the son of Nun and to the heads of the fathers' houses of the tribes of the people of Israel. And they said to them at Shiloh in the land of Canaan, the Lord commanded through Moses that we be given cities to dwell in, along with their pasture lands for our livestock. So, by command of the Lord, the people of Israel gave to the Levites the following cities and pasture lands out of their inheritance. So, it's like they can own some cattle or whatnot, but it's not a big deal, and it's not supposed to really be their source of income. Okay, but they don't have their own designated tribal area. Okay, so that's kind of how we get this. But then let's look at verses 43 through 45. Okay, we're going to go to the end of the chapter. Thus the Lord gave to Israel all the land that he swore to give to their fathers, and they took possession of it. So this is kind of wrapping up everything. And the Lord gave them rest on every side, just as he had sworn to their fathers. Not one of all their enemies had withstood them, for the Lord had given all their enemies into their hands. Not one word of all the good promises that the Lord had made to the house of Israel had failed. All came to pass. Okay? So the point of all of this is to say what? God is faithful to his promises. And we kind of see that interwoven, but now it's stated very explicitly. Okay? A couple of things on the Levites. So this is on page 30. Levites, it comes from the Hebrew word meaning joined or attached. So what's kind of the word picture there? Well, they're attached to God. See, not to a particular tribal land allotment. And so the picture is that they serve as God's priests. Okay? And a priest is like a go-between, right? Doesn't take the place of God, right? But God instituted what? This function that they hold. Okay? And so the name kind of, tells us that. Okay? And then, so more on the Levite sort of thing. The Lord had commanded. Okay, this lets us know what? That what's happening is by God's doing. And then the Lord gave. So these are little things, words and phrases that let us know that this is God's doing, and that's how we should understand it. Okay? The people are involved, but yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, it'll probably have like floor dust on it or something. Okay? So chapter 21 records the allocation of cities to the Levites, the tribe responsible for religious duties. Their inheritance was not a contiguous land, right? So what do we call the 48 states? We say continental, but really contiguous, meaning we're all kind of glommed together, and you can go from one to another. Okay, Alaska and Hawaii are not part of the contiguous United States because, right, separated by an ocean, or you have to drive through Canada. Okay, but cities scattered throughout other tribes' territories. That's where the Levites will live. This underscored the Levites' role as spiritual guides and the integration of faith into everyday life. Okay. Now, St. Augustine, so he lived in what? 5th century? He saw the Levite scattered cities as a preview of the church spread worldwide. He wrote, just as the Levites had no specific portion of land but dwelt scattered throughout the entire promised land, so the church of Christ today is spread throughout the world. So, Israel was a territorial people. But within the territory of Israel, you had this group of people which lived throughout all of the territory or the land. They were the Levites, the priesthood, right? In the New Covenant, how does the New Testament refer to us? We're all brought into the royal priesthood, and right, everywhere. So that's not crazy what St. Augustine was saying, right? Yeah. It actually kind of makes sense. If you see Israel kind of as a microcosm, and then the New Covenant, everywhere. Okay? So, this understanding from St. Augustine invites us to see ourselves as modern-day Levites, which matches especially Peter, right? So, you are a holy nation, a royal priesthood, okay? As modern-day Levites, bringing God's presence to every corner of our world. So, we could agree with Augustine on that, okay? And the eastern tribes return home, okay? So we'll read this last little part. Because we know that there are tribes where? Remember early on? This is where, like Manasseh, this is where you're going to live. But what we find out is that, oh, well, here's where you're going to live, but it's like everybody was still kind of clustered together. Right? So, no, come on. Spread out. Occupy the land. Otherwise, we could very well lose it. Okay? So, at that time, Joshua summoned the Reubenites and the Gadites and the half-tribe of Manasseh. Which half-tribe? The half-tribe that were designated to live on the other side of the Jordan River. Okay? And said to them, you have kept all that Moses, the servant of the Lord, commanded you, and have obeyed my voice in all that I have commanded you. You have not forsaken your brothers these many days down to this day, but have been careful to keep the charge of the Lord your God. So, in our parlance, we would say, but, right? And now the Lord your God has given rest to your brothers as he promised them. Therefore, turn and go to your tents in the land where your possession lies. You've been faithful all this time. Don't be unfaithful now. Right? He's not saying that. But I mean, there's a little bit in there in the subtext, right? This is your land. You need to live there. Okay? It's for the well-being of Israel. Therefore, turn and go to your tents in the land where your possession lies, which Moses, the servant of your Lord, gave you on the other side of the Jordan. Only be very careful to observe the commandment and the law that Moses, the servant of the Lord, commanded you. To love the Lord your God and walk in all his ways, and to keep his commandments, and to cling to him, and to serve him with all your heart and with all your soul. So Joshua blessed them and sent them away, and they went to their tents. Now, what was that little bit about saying, oh, but be faithful to God? Well, of course. But, see, they're separated by a river. That's no big deal today, right? But back then, I mean, sometimes rivers were a big deal to cross. You know, so when Israel crossed into the Promised Land, it happened to be during spring, and there was a lot of rains, and it was impassable. So the miracle was that God stopped and the Israelites walked through. Now, you know, after a hot summer and there hasn't been much rain, no big deal. It's muddy and the current's slow, and you find the shallow spots and no problem. Okay, so but it can be. Okay, and so we don't see that today because we just drive through everywhere and whatever. But you can even see it if you're a geek like me, and you go back to churches that were put up in places. So in our church body, if churches were put up in the 1800s, right, and it was an area where Lutherans lived, there would be a church about every 8 miles, because that's about how far you can go on horse, you know, go to church and come back. Say, oh, okay, 8 miles, right? But if there was a river, there might be a small church 3 miles away from another one. Why? Well, because the river might become impassable. And there you have it. And this was when, you know, agriculture was an intensive sort of thing, where it took a lot of people to, produce the crop and farm the land. Now it's all like, you know, you have one dude in a combine, and they might even have traveling combines, right? But yeah, so it was a different era. But you can see that. So here, that makes sense. Well, you know, yeah, you're part of Israel, but at the same time, there's a little bit of geographical separation because of the river. So don't let that kind of, in a sense, make you complacent and what? Just kind of, right? Kind of give up on following God. So, how does Joshua's farewell address serve as a reminder for the Israelites? Well, especially the Manasseh ones on the other side of the river. It reminds them of their covenant with God, urging them to remain faithful. That's it. So, next week, okay, we have chapter 23, chapter 24. Well, yeah, I'll go through that because I don't want to make it long, but at the same time, there's stuff in this, not just allotment of land. So the allotment of land is like, oh, okay, and these guys got that, and these guys got that. So this is kind of, and and we'll come across one of the more well-known verses of Joshua, but that's for next week or the week after. Okay? We'll close with prayer. Our Father, as we make our way through Joshua, we could really see certain themes on how you are faithful, how you care for your people, and yet there are parts that for us are really tough because of all these names and things we're not familiar with, and so to us, very little of it makes sense. But beyond that, we can still see how you're working through people, mechanisms, history, and you still do so. So in that regard, the book of Joshua still has much value. Give us sharp minds as we continue on the last two chapters of the text, that we may understand who you are and also who your old covenant people were. In our Savior's name we pray. Amen.